Hello my fellow fish fans, and welcome to Heidi's Fish Tank. I hope that you all are having a lovely day. I am going to do an update of the Nano Tank today. So if you're new around here, consider hitting the subscribe button and the bell so you don't miss any updates. I've been posting quite a lot here lately, but I haven't done an update on the Nano Tank. So I will link in the iCard right there my playlist about this tank, but let's jump right into it, shall we? So if you guys have not been following this tank, I think I've only done one update for it so far. This is my husband's 5.5 gallon fish tank that is normally in his classroom because he is a teacher. And I did a whole video talking about kind of the pros and cons of nano tanks. And I think that's the only video I have done about this tank so far. And it was a pretty good video in my opinion, but I realized that I've been talking a lot about some of the other tanks that are going on, and I thought I would do an update over here. So the first thing that has changed since that last video is we've added another neon tetra. Now I talked in that video about how stocking a nano tank can be one of the trickiest things. It can be really, really hard to find something that can fit in this small of a tank because most fish that are small, like neon tetras, are schooling fish and therefore need a decent sized school. So there's always this balance of bioload and having enough fish so that they feel safe. So the absolute minimum number of neon tetras that I would keep is 5. And there's a couple things that you're kind of thinking about when you're determining how many fish a tank can have. In fact, I want to do a whole video about it. Maybe I will at some point this week. Hit the bell so you don't miss it. But in my opinion, 5 is the absolute minimum that I would do. In terms of a school of fish, I also obviously have an Endler in there, but Endlers do okay on their own. So Endlers, in my opinion, are one of the best nano fish, apart from maybe like a betta or like a pea puffer, those kinds of things. So this tank has a little bit of problems, and we'll talk a little bit about that. Now this tank is having a little bit of issues, although nothing that is too terrible in my opinion. So anyways, I had this neon tetra, was in quarantine. It had been moved out. If you'd like to know more about my quarantine procedure, if I have space, I will link that in the iCard as well. But as you can see, we've got a little bit of like debris and algae on this Anubias plant right over here, and then there is a little bit of diatoms on the back wall. It's not a lot or anything, but today is water change day, and I am going to make sure that I scrub those. I just added a new light to this tank as of the last update, so it had a much lower light, and now it has this Marineland light, which is designed for a much bigger tank, which I think is part of the reason why we're having algae problems all of a sudden. So what I've done so far is kind of just scraped off the algae when I've seen it, although to be honest, I haven't been like super aggressive with it. Algae is not a problem unless it's a problem for you, but it's not bad for the fish. So I've kind of just like, when I see it, I'll scrub it off a little bit, but that annoys me. So I want to get that off of there. And then I've had the light off for a couple of days. Now this tank is usually in my husband's classroom. He is a high school teacher, but he is home for the summer, which is why the tank is at our house right now. And the place that we put it is not the most ideal place to put a tank. It's pretty close to a couple windows, so I'm sure that that is contributing a little bit to the algae. However, there has been quite a bit of plant growth. Now if you guys have watched my daughter's betta videos, if you watch that playlist, you'll know that the plants in that tank are growing completely out of control. I added some bulb plants like onion and dwarf aquarium lily, which the dwarf aquarium lily hasn't been growing all that great, but the Apontigeton grows insane. And so I went out and I bought some more of those, and those are starting to sprout. And then this wisteria is also starting to sprout. Back here, this right here is one of those bulb plants. I don't know which one. I think it's the onion plant, but I'm sure someone in the comments will tell me. The nitrates in this tank, however, are doing very, very well. One of the biggest challenges with a nano tank is keeping the water parameters in check. Now, obviously, I do have algae problems, although they're not terrible. The parameters are on point on this tank, and I am very, very, very pleased with that. I think the plants are starting to really, really help with that. Nitrates are nice and low. Now, of course, they might be low in part because of the algae that's growing, but I'm hoping that now that we've done a few days off of the light, I will set the timer and the light will come back. Now, if you guys look real closely, I don't know if you're going to be able to see, if the camera will focus, right there, we do have some tiny pest snails. Do you see it? Some tiny pest snails in this tank. Now this tank does have a an assassin snail in it, so we don't have like an outbreak of pest snails, and in my opinion snails aren't bad unless there's like just an enormous amount of them. So I'm not worried about those little guys. I know that the assassin snail will kind of keep their population in check, and they'll help with the algae in the meantime. So that's kind of some of my thoughts on that. Now, as far as stocking in this tank, I think that we're pretty much done. I have considered adding a couple more shrimp, always thinking about adding more plants. The more plants you have, the better the tank will work or whatever, but possibly adding some shrimp. I was concerned about whether or not the shrimp would be eaten by the assassin snail, but I've heard from some of you in the comments that said that you had ghost shrimp, or maybe it was a mono shrimp, I can't remember which one, and your assassin snail didn't eat them. So thinking about maybe some Amanos, because Amanos are supposed to be really good for algae, or at least so I hear. Overall, the tank is doing great. I do a very small water change once a week, and the thing I love about nano tanks is it's so easy to do a water change. So I literally just take like a cup, just like a Starbucks cup. There's my hands. Like a Starbucks cup. It's like the size of like an iced venti cup, and scoop a couple of scoops out, and we add just drinking water to this tank, just like purified drinking water that we buy at the grocery store. Now, of course, you could always add tap water with dechlorinator, but if you've followed my channel for a while, you know that our tap water is particularly terrible here. We have really bad nitrates and really bad ammonia in our tap water, so I don't use my tap water for anything. And I do find that the drinking water seems to be better for the neon tetras, as opposed to like stealing my parents' water, which is what I do for the 10-gallon tank, because my parents' water is harder, which is better for live bearers. So of course that would be better for that, that Endler if we did that. But you know what? This is working. This is kind of what we've been doing. I also started dosing, since the tank came to our house, some fertilizer. I will link the fertilizer down below, and I have definitely obviously seen a lot of growth with all these plant bulbs that we've added and the wisteria. However, I think I'm going to cut back on the fertilizer a little bit. I just use the Seachem Flourish. I know that there are other ones that people really swear by. API Leaf Zone is one that I would really like to try. I haven't tried anything else from the Flourish line apart from Flourish root tabs, which I don't run in this tank because I don't have any sword plants in this tank or anything that's a root feeder, but I do love it for root feeding plants. And I have used the API root tabs as well, which I like just as well as the Seachem one. But in this tank, all I use is the Seachem Flourish. I would be interested to try some of the other stuff though. I know a lot of people really like the Easy Green as well from Aquarium Co-op, and I haven't had a chance to really try that, but we'll see when the Flourish runs out. However, I think I'm going to cut back on the fertilizer just a smidgen bit. Even though the nitrates are staying really good in this tank, I obviously do have a little bit of algae growth. So until that algae's back into control, I will probably only dose the fertilizer. And it's so little, you guys, it's like a drop that goes into this tank. I will probably only dose the fertilizer once every 2 weeks instead of once a week. The thing about this tank is that, yes, it's a small tank, and so it does need more attention, or could need more attention, but I also really want it to be an extremely low maintenance tank because it is my husband's tank, and it is one that lives in his classroom, and for that reason, the plants need to do a lot of the work. And so I definitely don't want to add anything else that's going to add bioload to the tank, because I know that this tank, when he gets back to work, is going to sit in his classroom. So if we have to do a bunch of fertilizing really frequently and those kinds of things, I'm afraid that that will cause problems because he doesn't maintain the tank as often as I do when it's here. So that's just some things that I'm kind of thinking about. But I also would really love if the plants just grew into this insane forest of plants like they have done in my betta tank, because my betta tank is staying very well in line in terms of nitrates. And like I said, this one is staying really well too. I just tested it before my last water change, and the nitrates were at like 10. I probably could have gotten away without doing a water change, but I decided to do one anyways in order to, again, kind of combat that algae. Now, I have also noticed, and I'd love to hear from you guys in the comments, that these plants are growing a lot better since I started actually the blackout of leaving this light completely off. It's been off for like 3 days because I was trying to fight some of that algae. And the plants have grown quite a lot in that time. And I couldn't for the longest time figure out why the plants aren't doing well. I mean, they're doing fine, but weren't doing quite as well in this tank as they were doing in the betta tank, because this light is obviously a lot stronger. And I think that the conclusion that I've drawn is that the light might be too strong for this small of a tank. And so now that I'm going to put the light back on a timer, I'm going to run it for maybe a shorter period of time and see if the plants continue to do okay. I don't really know. Or I might go back to the light that was on it before. The light that was on it before, I will try to remember to link both these lights in the description box. The light that was on it before was just a very, very basic LED light that I got off of Amazon, really cheap. It was one of those like hang arm ones where it just attaches to the back. And my husband had said that he wanted a different light, and so I just threw this one on here because we already had it. But it's just a higher light. It's just higher light content. Some other things that I've thought about with this tank too is like, oh, maybe we could throw some CO2 in there, and then the plants will grow like crazy as well, and that will help make it less and less and less maintenance for my husband, because it is just kind of like a decorative tank in his classroom for his kids to enjoy. But again, I don't want to be adding anything that is going to have to be something that he's going to maintain, because I do maintain all the tanks at my parents' house, and I will do water changes and stuff on this tank, but I do know that my husband does more of the work in this tank than my parents do in their tank. I don't get to his school as often as I get over to my parents' house, so he does do some of the work, which is exactly why we decided to go with a freshwater tank rather than a nano saltwater tank, although I do think it would be really cool to do one of these 5.5 gallon tanks with like a species only little nano or pico reef kind of thing with like a clown goby or something like that. I wouldn't do like, I don't know, clownfish or something like this in a 5.5 gallon tank, but there are some cool saltwater things you can do. But again, that was something with parameter shifting. I just felt like freshwater would be easier in general, because the biggest thing with a nano tank and saltwater is just that you have to stay on top of the salinity. So anyways, that is the update on the nano tank. I hope that you guys enjoyed it. If you did, give the video a thumbs up. If you're new around here, consider hitting the subscribe button and the bell. I would also love to hear from you guys in the comments of what kind of videos you would like to see. I do have another tank that's going to be showing up here very soon because I am going to be tank sitting. So I will do a video all about being a tank babysitter when that comes. And there will be a video coming soon on the empty tank. I have started to formulate a plan of what exactly I'm going to do with that tank, so that will be coming up as well. Hit the bell so you don't miss it. But let me know in the comments what you guys would like to see, and I will talk to you all soon. Bye guys.